guys, this is Michelle Kane with Michelle Kane Photography and Actions. On this video tutorial, we're going to look at taking this straight out of camera image and creating this matte, soft sort of feel to the picture. I'm going to be using a combination of my Photoshop actions from the Creative Heart, the Heart and Soul, and the Botanical Blends action sets. You can find more information about those actions on my website, michellecanephotography.com. So to start out with, let's take a look at this layers palette, and you can see the series of actions that I've played to create this particular edit. And we're going to start here with Blend to Brilliant. So I'm going to go into my history and just take it back to the original straight out of camera. So the Blend to Brilliant is in the Creative Heart set, and I'm just going to look it up here. And we're going to play this at 100% opacity. Blend to Brilliant is just a good starting point for just about any picture, just to kind of break through any kind of haze, just pop the picture just a little bit. Really, I'm using it to make her nice and sharp and make her dress pop a little bit and give some clarity to her eyes. We're looking for an overall soft image, which we will continue to create, but I like to just give my picture that beginning boost, and Blend to Brilliant does a really good job with that. So leaving that just as it is, just as it plays 100%, no tweaks. Next thing I want to do is kind of look at the grass and the trees and give it just a little soft sort of feeling to it. So we're going to play an action in the Botanical Blend set called Buttery Blur. And what Buttery Blur is going to do is create just a little bit of a softer effect. Now this is definitely one of those actions that you can go into and open up the layers, and you're going to have a light blur, a boosted blur, and a rich blur. And basically I suggest you go in there and kind of turn the visibility of each layer on and off, play with the opacities of these layers and see if there's a combination that you like. You can use it for different reasons, for making a picture rich and soft, contrasty and soft, or light and soft. But we're going to leave this one as it plays 100%, and I'm going to go in here and zoom to her eyes, and with a brush and probably about 50% opacity, just a black brush, I've got the white layer mask on Buttery Blur selected, so we're going to paint this off of her eyes. And it's just a minor thing. I'm just making her eyes a little bit sharper so that none of that blur from Buttery Blur kind of softens her eyes and makes them look dull. So the next thing I want to do, I'll zoom back out here, is play the action called Spicy, and this again is also in the Botanical Blends, and what it's going to do is kind of just boost the edges a little bit. And once it plays, I don't want it on the entire picture, I just want it on certain parts of the picture. So what we can do is invert this layer mask, Command or Control I, and using a white brush for that black layer mask, switch my brush color, and maybe about a 50% opacity soft brush. I'm just going to put it in the picture just in a few places. Now I'm revealing the spicy effect just kind of around the vignetted edges of the bottom here. It makes that green grass a little bit greener, a little bit richer. So next I want to basically look at her skin here, and just on her face it just feels a little bit dark, a little bit shadowed because she has dark eyes anyway. It needs brightened up a little bit. So I'm going to use another Botanical Blends action, and it's called Sassafras, and this is going to play over the entire picture. And we don't want it over the whole picture, or I don't on this one. We could just take the opacity down and, you know, lighten up the picture and give it kind of that creamy, airy sort of feel. But what I want to do is invert this again. So Command or Control I, and then now I'm going to paint it in just to where I want it. So with a brush, I've got a black mask that's hiding sassafras. I need a white brush to reveal it. I'm going to go low opacity, like 30% opacity, and just begin to kind of bring it in over her face just a little bit. And this is just minor. This isn't really a big, huge change, but it's the minor little tweaks that you'll find that make all the difference in your pictures when it's said and done. So Sassafras just kind of brightened things up just a little bit with her face, If I want to lower that down, maybe I got it too intense, I can pull it down and then just slowly start to bring my opacity of the sassafras layer up. Next, what I want to do is soften up and make this grass not so sharp and make it just feel kind of creamy and blurry. So Bring on the Bokeh is what we're going to play, and that is in the Heart and Soul set. And what this is going to do is tell us to use a white brush to paint this effect where we want to. So maybe about a 50% opacity brush again. Actually, I'm going to undo that and go back down to about 20% opacity brush, because I really like to bring these effects in slow and start to build up the effects rather than come in really harsh with a 100% opacity brush. So as you can see on the layer mask, it's starting to add in anywhere where it's kind of whitish gray in here is where I've added in this Bring on the Bokeh effect. So this is what's really making that grass feel creamy and soft and smooth, and I think I'll come in here and even run a little bit on her dress. So let's kind of just take a peek at where we were to begin with. So there's our starting point, and here's what we've done so far. After Bring on the Bokeh, I just start to see that her face looks a little bit dull, a little bit flat, and I really like rosy cheeks and lips. So we're going to play that. And this one is in the Heart and Soul set as well. And of course, start with a very, very low opacity brush. This is a white brush at 5% opacity, and then I'm just going to start to kind of click it on her cheeks. And what you might find as you start editing is that people's faces can start to get really flat, and they lose the dimension in them. You can either bring that dimension back by, in this case, using a tone, a little pink color, or you can darken it up, maybe run like a DIY dark, do-it-yourself dark, and just paint in some darkness. So you're painting back in that shape of the face, so they just don't look flat and dull, and it just doesn't look very human. Again, that happens when you brighten up skin tones. That's often the case what happens. From there, let's go ahead and darken up the edges just a little bit again. This is going to be a little bit of hand vignetting, so we're going to make these edges here just feel a little bit darker so that our focus comes into the subject here. And we're going to use a creative heart action called Sumptuous Smolder. And Sumptuous Smolder is going to darken and soften at the same time. So when it plays, again, it's on the whole picture. It's revealed with the white layer mask. We want to invert that, Command or Control I once again, and paint it into where we want. And you'll see that this is a very common theme with the way I work, is I add effects where I want them. Sometimes that's so much easier than just trying to take out effects where you don't want them. So just using my white brush here, I'm slowly starting to paint in with a 20% opacity brush, just this little darkening effect, this little vignette effect around her. I'll make my brush a little bit smaller, and I'm just going to go over her dress just a little bit to make it feel a little richer. And even though I'm using a 20% opacity brush, I'm clicking, 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 so eventually there's more than 20% opacity of this Sumptuous Smolder put down on the area where I'm clicking at. So once I think that looks pretty good, I just want to sharpen it up just a little bit, and we're going to use an action called Shallow Clarity, and this is pretty much just for her. I spent all this time and effort trying to make the edges look very soft and creamy. We don't want to go back in there and sharpen them back up. I just want her to be sharp. So we're going to run an action from the Botanical Blends called Shallow Clarity. There's Shallow Clarity and there's Deep Clarity, and as you play them you'll see that Shallow Clarity is a very fine sharpening. Deep Clarity is a very thick kind of sharpening where it adds a lot of contrast into the picture. So once this is run, I'm seeing it on the whole picture here, and I just want to make sure it's off my grass. So instead of inverting this and painting it in where I want it, I'm going to basically now paint it off of where I don't want it. So I've got a white layer mask, going to grab a black brush, and I'll get about a 60% opacity brush. I just hit the 6 key on my keyboard, and now basically what's happening is the clarity is being removed from the grass. So wherever you see on this layer mask that it's black, it's being removed. Where it's white, the clarity is showing. So the clarity is showing on her, it's not showing on the edges. Now, this is kind of a stopping point. You could look at this picture and be done with it, but I want to create a further matte feel to it. It kind of has that matte, soft feel a little bit, with this grass feeling very soft and fluffy and creamy and that kind of thing, but I want to put sort of a haze effect on it, and I just call this effect sort of a matte feeling to the picture. And what matte is going to do is you're pulling down the blacks, basically. We're taking down the contrast, and we're making things just very monotone sort of, and soft feeling. So the action I'm going to start with is matte overlay, and that is in the Heart and Soul set. And this does not add any color with it, it's just strictly grayscale here, so I'm going to say OK. And once this is done, we can see if we click it on and off, it went from very contrasty, we can see lots of black shadows and whatnot in these little parts of the grass, to now it's kind of toned down. But what I don't want is to have this over her skin and her eyes 100%. I think we need to remove it somewhat over the areas that are dark and lose detail. So if I zoom into her, I don't really like this effect totally on her skin. So I'm going to grab a 30% opacity white brush, black brush. I just accidentally changed the opacity of the layer here, so I'm going to bump that back up. I need to make the brush 30%, not the layer 30%. So I've got a 30% opacity brush, and I'm just going to start to remove a little bit of this matte overlay off of her, so she continues to be kind of sharp and colorful in her dress. And I'll zoom back out because I like to look at it in context with the entire picture. So as I zoom out, using the soft brush, I can just kind of remove this effect from the places I don't want it. And I think I'm going to take this matte overlay, actually I think I'll leave it at 70%, that looks pretty good. So if we click this on and off, very contrasty, and this is the soft kind of matte feel. I want to further this matte feel and go just one step more and add an action from the Botanical Blends, and we're going to play one called Rose Hip. Now you could really create this matte feel with so many of these Botanical Blends actions. They just have different tones and feelings. Some make it brighter, some make it darker, some make it contrasty, and some not. So you'll just kind of have to experiment, but this one, Rose Hip, is what we're going to do for this. So once this plays, it's very intense over the entire image here at 70% opacity. So let me just drop that down somewhere around maybe 30%. And then again, just like before with the matte overlay, I want to remove just a little bit of this off of her. Not a lot, just this low opacity brushing over her so she continues to be nice and kind of popping from this soft effect. It wouldn't look right if she was like super contrasty sharp, popped out from this really hazy, soft looking grass, but just a little bit popped out is sort of a nice effect. So I lightly brush, you can see it in the layer mask here, just barely taking this off of her. We'll zoom out one more time and take a peek and make sure that this is what we like. Maybe inch that Rose Hip up again. Here's really maxed out with Rose Hip. We're going to take it back down to about 33, as kind of 34 is where I like it. So that's it. That's the final edit. So really we start with a little contrast, then work the grass, then kind of spot work her skin with sassafras, just brightening up a little bit. Make the grass even softer with bringing on the bokeh. Get some detail and color back into her cheeks with rosy cheeks and lips. Hand vignette the edges with Sumptuous Smolder. Again, you can do just a vignette action. You can just darken it yourself with DIY dark. You could use a curves of your own to darken, or levels. Sumptuous Smolder just added that extra richness and a layer of softness in with the darkening effect. A little bit of clarity on just her, and then to finish it off, the matte overlay and the Rose Hip. Now again, here's where our picture ended before we created that matte finish to it. So matte overlay and Rose Hip. And now we've got this soft, pretty, more artistic looking picture. You can find out more information about the botanical blends, the heart and soul, and the creative heart actions. We've also got caramel and a series of freebie actions on the website, MichelleKanePhotography.com. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you're having fun with the actions, and we'll see you next time.